experts from Rooftop that is providing us the space for free. So thank you very much for telling me. So basically, this is the first meetup, and the group purpose is that created is to kind of like bring people that care about building web apps together. So whether you do coding, you do analytics, you do design, you do product, you do funding, or anything like that, I would like to have like a series of talks, maybe one every month. The next one will be in January, where we kind of like share our experience and things that we know, we learned, mistakes we did, and stuff like that. I would not want to be the next person talking, and I have a few people that volunteered as well, but if any of you have some nice topics you would like to talk about, then please get in touch with me after the session. What we're going to do in this, yeah, I think I'm going to use Meteor here. What we're going to do in this meetup is try to build a BeerHunt event, and is going to take about 1 hour. Please stop me to ask any question whenever you feel like. But one thing to keep in mind is don't be really meticulous about the code if you don't really understand like the syntax, because maybe you're not as familiar with JavaScript. There is a GitHub. There are all the commits with all the list of changes that you can follow. So you can have a look at that later. And if you have like a question about why we're doing something, like why you're using this approach, then definitely ask that. Otherwise, if it is why do you have that keyword, or maybe it's something that if it is code related, we can sort out later. So just to find out, can you raise your hand if you are a coder or if you code? Awesome. So that's pretty much everybody. Great. So, and how many of you know Meteor as a platform? That's right. So, no, that's number one. That sounds smart, like using domain parking there. Okay, so Meteor is a full-stack JavaScript framework. You can create web apps very easily with these. Your speed to execution is like it's not, and what it does. Exactly as you see here, it is very, very nice, beautiful animation. You launch it, create an app, and then you can modify your app and you can deploy. We will deploy to the Meteor.com website tonight. It is like a test website, you just deploy, but use to actually deploy on a real server using Meteor app, that is the usual node package that you use to deploy is pretty much the same. You configure a file with the credentials of your server, and then you just fire this online deploy. And what we do is create this one here. It is basically the kind of like a beer hunt, where you see a list of beers. I see that somebody already used that, and you can have like your own beers here. And when you add a beer, it gets one vote, and then you can vote on that as many times as you want, and it goes on top. And you can cheat, and you can vote 1,000 times, of course. No fancy limit on that. And you can realize that you can cheat because Bex will never be on top otherwise. Or you can select from a list of beers, and this is taken from Wikipedia. And list of available beers made in Germany. And I hope that it is kind of fine. Okay, so let's start. Any questions so far? Great. Also make sure I have my everyone here, and as editor I just use WebStorm. And the first thing I'm going to do is with Meteor is just do a Meteor create and the name of the app. I actually do that in my projects folder. So Meteor create BeerHunt say test. This will create a single app skeleton that I can just run right away now and have it on my browser. So if I now go into that folder and fire it up with Meteor, oh, I already have another Meteor app on that port. So in that case, if you run a multiple Meteor app, you just have to specify a different port. So I'm just going to use a 1, 2, 3 port now. Oh, that's easy as well. I got my Meteor app for 51. Maybe I should start something. So this basically will build whatever is the basic package and run it on the browser. So now if I go back to my browser and maybe wait a little bit here until it's finished and go on localhost, because we're going to press here. 4.3.1, you can see that this is the basic Meteor app. And what it does is sets up the basic skeleton, it sets up the template, and creates a local instance of a database using MongoDB as a default database, and that you can then work on. So I'm now preparing WebStorm. I'm just opening the text project I just created, and I'm going to share this here. Perfect. So these will create 3 files that we really don't care about. We're just going to remove them all, because we are hardcore developers and we just start from scratch every time. So this is the basic folder, and unlikely I can't really focus on the folder here, but I will make the editor much bigger. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create 3 folders: 1 client, 1 server, and 1 lead folder. And the reason why I'm doing this is because Meteor as a framework allows you basically to run the same code on all stacks, on the client, on the server, and or on both. So basically, creating these 3 folders is following a best practice in Meteor development that will basically run the code in the client folder just on the client, in the server folder just on the server, and in any other folder that we call lib anywhere. And what I need to do here is I'm going to basically add Bootstrap, and it is, I guess many of you know, one kind of like a boilerplate skeleton for building apps. It provides like a nice UI and responsive design and things like that. And the way I'm going to do that is by using Atmosphere.js. Atmosphere.js is one of the many great things that come with Meteor. Is basically there is a huge community of people that created packages that made them available for Meteor developers. And all these packages are, most of these packages are available at atmosphere.js.com. So you just go to atmosphere.js, search for what you need, and usually it's anything, Bootstrap. And I pick the Bootstrap package here, that is the one that I know is most used. You can also see by the number of users. Copy and paste the command to actually add it to my project, and I'll complicate things a little bit here. And the Bootstrap package. Now, what this will do, even when the app is running, I don't need to stop the app. I can just add my Bootstrap package. The app will recognize that there is a change, and will recompile and redo all the things. And what this fancy thing does is finds out there is a change in packages, in client, in server. Cool. I'm just going to refresh the particular part that you need to be refreshed. So now what I want to do is I want to just add a basic HTML file. So just go in the client folder, because I'm dealing with front-end stuff. I add my main.html file, and I don't have to specify anything like doc type or the HTML container, because that comes with Meteor. So I'm just gonna give it a head with a title. Oh, this one I can actually make it bigger. Can everybody see that? Yeah. Cool. And in the body, I am going to just have like a basic container that is the Bootstrap like container definition, and a simple title. So now if I go back to my browser and just wait, yeah, things magically appear here. So Meteor is one of the things that has been built with developers in mind. Is an amazing platform that simplifies a lot of things. One of these many things it comes with is the hot code reload. It means that if you are modifying something on the client, it will automatically refresh your client when you're actually developing. And if you modify something on the server, it will recompile and rerun the server part of the app, but without refreshing your browser. And also these things come when you actually deploy. So when you deploy live your app, if there are like 20 users connected, they all see the page refreshing with the new app. And if they have like any data in any form, that data stays there. So if you use specific best practice, if you follow specific best practice by Meteor, of course. I just created my basic skeleton now, and what I want to do is I want to work by templates. That is the way the Meteor templating engine works. So you build different templates, and you can then reuse them in different parts of the site. Another great thing about Meteor is that I can create as many files as I want here, and these files are really just for you, for your own organizational purposes. You can also like create folders with files and so on. What Meteor does is it gets all the HTML files, bundles them up together, creates the JavaScript to render these files, and then gives you like this big JavaScript file that actually designs and builds the app for the client. So your app is not really a set of HTML file and JavaScript, but is mainly one big JavaScript file that is then served to the clients. So I'm going to have like a beers HTML file that is the file where I want to list all my beers. So I'm going to add, I'm going to define the template first, and the way to define a template is by just having a tag template and specifying a name like beers. Let's add like subtitle or something. And for the moment, we're just going to add a list of beers that is obviously fake. As I said, nobody's going to have backs at the top. And so this is the kind of thing that I want to make dynamic, that I want people to vote on and stuff like that. And then I want also another template that is the template that defines the form to actually add a new beer. So I'm just going to create a new file called addbeer.html, create a template, and here is the folder. And the classes that I'm using are just Bootstrap classes. So if you go on the Bootstrap website, in the guide and guidelines, you will find out that these are just the default classes that you use. Just going to simple input here. Oops. And I got to say submit. So, of course, these templates are just loaded into the app, but they're not used anywhere. So what I have to do here now is use this templating engine provided by Meteor, handlebars basically, and reference the template that I just created. So one has been named beer, that is the name that I used here. So in main.html, I'm just going to use beer here. And the other one is beers. I was checking if you were paying attention. You passed the test. And thanks for that. And the other one is add beer. So, and if I'm going to be very optimistic and just check my app, perfect. You just refreshed and you can actually see something that you form here. So you have a list of beers and you have the form that you just defined. So what we want to do now is actually we want to play and deal with data. So you want actually to display a list of actual beers, and you want to make sure that whenever you say you want a new beer, you actually save the beer into a collection. And the way Meteor works is by using MongoDB. MongoDB is a NoSQL database, very well known. I'm not going to go into details for that. And we're just going to integrate MongoDB now in Meteor. Now the kind of like peculiar part of MongoDB is that Meteor came with this mini-Mongo implementation. I call it mini-Mongo. That is something that allows you to query the database from the client. So they kind of like replicate most of the functionalities, and it's almost like from the client, from the front end, you can actually query everything that you have in your database, and it's something that is very, very powerful. So you don't have like to expose data or to query from the client to the server to return the data that you need, and so on. Of course, you can do all these things, but you don't need to. So the first thing that we do is in the list of beers here, we want to make this dynamic. And the way we do it is by adding a JavaScript file, and we just add it on the client folder. We have a beers.js, so we just call it as the template. And in this file, we're going to define what kind of data we want to expose to the HTML. So on the HTML file here, we have a list, and I'm just going to keep it here for reference. Here we want to make this part dynamic. So what we're going to do is have a niche loop, so loop for each items. A list that we call my beers. That's like the handlebar syntax for writing dynamic behaviors in your HTML template. And here I'm just going to expose the name of the beer. So if I have like 3 beers with each with a different name, you're gonna see the different name here. And I'm going to delete this one now. And if I go back to the browser, this will be empty, of course, because I don't have any data. And also because there is nothing telling this template what my beer is. And the way to do that is by using a template helper from Meteor. The name of the template that I want to deal with, beers in this case, and call the helpers function. In this function, I can define what I want to expose to my template as an actual function. So here I have my beers function, and here is the funny part. Here is where I can actually query the MongoDB from the client. So let's say that I have a collection called beers that we're going to create later. So I do something like this. That would actually be the MongoDB syntax to get data. With this, you get a cursor that is like a pointer of the data, and with fetch you get the data. These, of course, will not work. Will generate some kind of errors because beers doesn't exist and is not defined anywhere. And I want my data, my collection, to be exposed on both the client and the server. That's why I'm going to create a file in the lead folder. So in the lead folder, I will create a file called collections, just to keep things simple. And define what kind of data source I want to use here. So I say that I want to create something beers. And if you're a JavaScript developer, you may wonder why you don't do that. It's because if you do this, Meteor is not going to expose these to files outside of the lib folder, or outside of this file specifically. So you want the beers variable to be available everywhere. Everywhere we're going to have to deal with actual beers. So, and here I use the Meteor syntax to create a collection on Mongo, sort of a table in SQL, called beers. So now if I go back here, this works. If I look at the console, there shouldn't be any error. But still I don't have any beers here. So let's just try maybe to add something from the console log here. And I can't make this bigger likely, but I'll show you what I'm going to write here. I'm just going to then comment it out. I'm just going to do beers.insert. I guess the Mongo syntax to insert something. And I'm just going to run this on the client, on the console. So if I do it here, voila. You see that we actually have a new beer appearing on top. And so what I did here is just calling an insert on the MongoDB. And the peculiar thing about Meteor and why this is all about connecting clients and connecting data and making it reactive is that by adding data here, something triggered an event on the server that decided to send an update to all the clients connected to that source of data saying, hey, there is new data here, refresh whatever part of your view that displays this data. So, of course, like when you add it here, you refresh it on the same page, so you can say, well, it's kind of obvious, it's on the same page. But if you have like another page, or if you deploy it live and this is on your Apple Watch, iPhone, Android device, whatever, that would be the same kind of behavior. That would be refreshing automatically as well. And this kind of like activity is at the core of Meteor, because what Meteor is bringing to the community is a shift from thinking from a server to client architecture where server delivers pages to client to one of connected clients, to a connected client system where you have all clients connected to some source of data that is properly shared and distributed, and updates are reactively shared as well. So if I want to add like, where's the mouse? Here. If I want to add a new beer, I just change the name and you will see get beers right away here. So I know that this is going fairly quick. But is there any question so far? Is there any like question on the approach or something about Meteor or anything like that? Take science as a good sign. I see that the pizza worked out. So now I want to basically add some interaction to this box, this part here. And the way I do it is by adding a new file, JavaScript file called @beer.js. I don't have to use the same name, but it's kind of like a best practice in the community to have a file name for the HTML for the template that has the same name as the file or the JavaScript file that applies behaviors on top of it. And it was very weird for me at the beginning to have the HTML and the JS file in the same folder. But if you think about a modular application where you keep like components that are very well structured and tied together, then you can easily identify which part of the application here are for adding a beer, which part are for listing a beer. So if you have a CSS file, you will have a beers.css and so on. So to add a behavior, I do something similar as I did for exposing data. So here I expose data using the template helpers. To add a behavior, I'm just going to use a template, the name of the template, and events. And in events is identifying interaction as in the action and the selector. And in this case, I want a click on the button that I add. So this is the action, this is the selector. It's a standard jQuery selector. I believe that's what's used at the core of Blaze. That is the template engine developed by the Meteor development group. And here I define my function that will allow me to take the value from the text field and insert it into the beers. So if I wanted to do it the happy way, I would just add a class to, I will just add a class to this text field. And do something like this. It's beer, but that's the actual value. So I'm just going to store a reference to the text field. And then I do beers, because that's the collection of all that is exposed on all stacks. Insert, name, text field, and then of course I want to reset the text field as well. So I just reset. So go back on my platform, and I think that it is going to refresh properly. We'll find out soon if it works. Yeah. Oh. It displays an object here. Actually means that I'm not
the reference.
You can have the value.
Oh God, yeah, thanks. And I didn't even drink any beer, so that's so yeah, perfect. So I had some bad data out there, but we're gonna leave it that. So this is gonna be a really cool developers focused beer. Okay. So now you can have an interactive app that is really cool. You can patent and get funding, investment, and make it big in your field. Just change beers with whatever you want to do in your life. Likely beer. But what we're going to do now, we have basically something that creates data, inserts that to a database, and we have something that lists data, and that's already using a lot of the functionality from Meteor. So the only thing that is kind of left here now is to like deploy it, making to create the voting, because we said we're going to do a BeerHunt kind of thing, and maybe even something to make it nicer, like pictures automatically taken from Google Maps. So we're going to like do a bit of these more complex things. So one thing that I want to do now is we have my app, and I want to deploy that. So if you go on Meteor.com, you create a developer account, it's free. Then only thing you have to do is do Meteor, deploy, and whatever name 123.meteor.com. Meteor. And And what this will do is it will create like a temporary subdomain for your project. If that is not already taken, package it up and deploy it up on Meteor.com so you can test it. And the good thing about this is that if you go after this, when this completes the operation, if you go to whatever name you want to turn it on Meteor.com, you can all like, this person can add a beer, and you, if you have the app, you will see the beer coming out automatically, and you will actually see how easy it is to build something that kind of looks like a chat, because really this could be a chat. You can just type, see the list, and then you can add the timestamp and see the date when something was typed and so on. So in like a few lines of code, you build a chat that is one of the basic things to connect people, to connect clients, and that's kind of like at the core of Meteor. Is uploading things, so we're not just gonna wait for that now. So any questions so far about what has been shown? Okay. Great. So basically now we want to add some devoting functionality. So we have our beers here, and we want to make sure that people can vote up all the beers. So next to the name, I'm just going to format this a little bit so it's clear to see. We are going to add a link called vote. And we're just gonna add a class so we can modify that. So for now I go back to the I should see the vote link next to it. And then I do basically the same thing I did for the add beers. I need to add some interaction, so I template, I add events to my template. And the event that I want to add is a click on that button, action vote, yeah. And I want this click to increase the voting on my beer. Now, the funny thing is that whenever you look with each directed into a list that is my beers, inside the loop, the context of your of the code is basically set to the actual element. So that's why here we use my name only, not something like my beers 0 or index.name. So the context inside here is directly related to the item that we're looking into. And we can use that context also inside the click. So if I do just an alert so you can all see, and you alert this underscore name, then when I click on this, you can see that it alerts the actual name of the beer. So this, in this case, is the actual beer record in the collection. So what I do here is I want to do call a beer update. The beer that I want to update is this underscore ID. So this is the Mongo identifier for the actual record. And the syntax in MongoDB to update something is just set, and then I need to say what I want to set. And this is basically I want to set the vote to be this vote or 0. This is just a failsafe to say if there is no vote, but is likely an example for all the beers initially. Set it to 0 plus 1. Now, this is cool, and this will likely work when I click on that, but I cannot see anything here. So I will just also need to display this new parameter that I created for the beer. Now, if we think about a beer, the beer is an object that includes a name and vote, because we added a vote here, so the vote property is automatically added on Mongo. So I go back to my template here, the beers.html, and I say, okay, vote, and here I just decide to expose the property vote of the specific beer. So if you go back here, you can see that this beer we voted has the number of votes that is increasing. And the funny thing is that you don't have like to click both. This will trigger an update on the server, and then you have to call an Ajax function to refresh the data or whatever it is. Like Meteor, based on WebSocket, will automatically reactively refresh all of this data for you to all the clients that are connected, not just this one. As you see, like the bot here is unspecified and it looks kind of ugly, so I will want to just show the bot if there is a bot. So I can use an if directive here, say if there is a bot, then show the bot. Otherwise, just say nobody wants it. So more likely because you added it, just you want it. It's just you, whatever. I think it's even not correctly issued. Either way. When you go here then, and then you wait for the refresh, then you can see that depending on whether something is a boot or not, then you can see that the beer displays. So Product Hunt works by showing the one with the top votes, with the highest number of votes on top. And this is just about sorting. And still, given that we can use MongoDB-like functionality on the client, we use MongoDB syntax here to basically sort the data by vote -1. That means a descending order for votes. So if we go back here to my client, now developer's beer object is the top one. And of course, like if it was something else here, we'll go up and so on. Any question so far? Sure.
If these were on separate machines, what would I see going across the network?
What goes across the network, so the way it works technically is that when you connect to it, you download the Meteor app that is the web behavior. And then you subscribe with the client using WebSockets, it is a very lightweight kind of protocol, to the data that you expose from Mongo collections, in this case the beers data. So you subscribe to that data, and it gives you initially the data of all the records that are part of the beers collection. And this is for every client that loads the Meteor app. Then whenever somebody changes data, it triggers an event that goes to all subscribed client and sends the new data, or just the data that has been changed, that in that case gets magically merged with whatever has already been pushed to all the clients, and the clients now say, okay, I have new data, I just have to refresh whatever is actually displayed in that particular data.
And is that data that's coming back then to all the clients something I'd recognize? Is it JSON or something like that? Or is
I believe everything is based on, actually I'm not sure whether it's JSON or somehow magic binary things, but no, I believe it's just a WebSocket based on JSON. They use, I think, Socket.io, that is one of the most common libraries with a fallback to Ajax for devices and browsers that don't support Socket. And it's just database communication, that is the way it should be. So I strongly bet it's to JSON, but I wouldn't be 100% sure of something and never actually investigated.
Thanks.
Anything else? Cool. So yeah, basically now we have something that kind of like looks like a really first garage version of BeerHunt, and it's, I think, is more than enough to get funding. But we want to make it a little bit better. We want to have like proper beers. We want to make sure that you can actually really select beer from a predefined list and display the beer. Make sure you can see an image of the beer or something a little bit better. So there is like a script that I developed. It's very stupid thing. I need just to find it here, where there is a page in Wikipedia that has the list of all German beers, and with this script you can actually scrape them and make sure and store them in a JSON string that then you can reuse to populate your database. So I'm just opening the script now. On the screen, that's why you don't see that. Just open that. Yes, second. In meanwhile, if you have any question, just okay. I keep asking for questions because I'm kind of like it's taking longer to find the script here. I'm trying. Oh, here it is. So. I have a script, I'm just going to put it here, but you can find it in the GitHub. I'm just going to have it here so you can actually see that. So I want to store some content that I don't want Meteor to use, because every time you create a folder, Meteor rebuilds the app and so on. And there is like a thing, maybe you want to replace with just instructions or things like that. So you just create a folder with that starts with a dot, and that would be excluded from the Meteor build process. In this case, .tools, and I'm going to have my scraping script here. And this is just something that goes on Wikipedia on this page. I'm not sure actually, maybe three Germans might tell me that this is actually completely wrong, but if that is the case, just actually go on Wikipedia and edit that list, because I'm using this as my source. I copy paste the script, and if they didn't change anything, this should give me a long string that is the JSON representation of the beers here. So I have now some data that I want to initialize my beers collection with. So I don't want to expose this data on the client, I don't want to expose this data on the common folder, so I'm going to use the server folder at this point. So I am going to create a file in the server called init.js, and maybe store my list from Wikipedia here. This is my list of beers. Actually, I can even parse it directly. And just make sure that I'm actually dealing with the right things and just going to console log that. And given the time on the server, the console log will actually output on your hub here. Yeah, so you can actually see that this is the correct list with the name of the beer and the URL pointing to the video. Now I have all the beers here, and what I do is usually what people do when initializing stuff is just check if the database is empty, then you put in all the data. But we're going to do something a little bit more advanced here, so I'm going to loop through all the beers, and I'm going to search for that beer in my database. So I just use the same collection that I exposed before. Find one in this case, and name is going to be name. Is name the property? Yes. It's beers list name. And if not found, then I am going to add a new one. I'm just going to use the actual object, so it has the name and the URL property, so I think I can live with that. And I'm going to say also now if these are started while I was coding and already added all the beers, then we're not going to see anything in here. Otherwise, I don't always say otherwise, else. Otherwise, we're gonna see this one here. Yeah. So now I know that I have all the beers in my database, and of course, like there are some times where you want to manipulate your data and have a look at your database. For that, I use the tool called 3T Mongo Chef. So whenever you launch Meteor locally, Meteor will create a database, an instance of the database running on the same port plus one that you are actually using for your web instance. So the port was 4321, I think. So I just have to connect to something. Test BeerHunt to localhost port 4322, and if I'm lucky, I have here my database. It will have a Meteor DB here, and here I can see the beers collection. So I double click on that and I see all the beers that have been created. So say that I want to start everything from scratch again, so I just clear the collection. To restart, just a new line, because you will recognize there is a change in the server, rerun the server, and it will re-add all the beers. Now I'm fairly sure that if I go back to my client, I can see that all the beers have been added here. Of course, there are no votes on this, but at least there is no bets or object or these kind of things. Any questions so far?
So would you say about the, you said you add one to the server thing?
Sorry?
You said you add one to the server? From your
Yeah, oh, at one line, so basically just here, so you mean, I'll go refresh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, okay, so is it just the way Meteor works, usually when you just call Meteor to fire your app, it will create an app on 3000, a local host on 3000. And it will also set up an instance of MongoDB locally on 3001. But if you have a port of whatever, it will be whatever plus one. So that's how you connect to the MongoDB instance of Meteor. Okay. So one thing I want to change now is that in the beers list, I want to make sure that I just show beers that actually have a vote. So I'm going to add a filter in my find function to make sure that vote is greater than or equal than 1. So only beers that actually have been voted will come up here, and of course there is nothing. And how do I vote a beer? I will just change the these controls to actually be a drop-down. So drop-down beer, and here I will have my option to actually where each option will represent a new beer. So I will have ID and so here we have like something that uses the My Beers collection, but My Beers is actually exposed in the beers template, not in the add beer template. So what I have to do is I'll just do a copy and paste now. Ideally, of course, you will like refactor that and use the same code and so on. But I'm just going to do a copy and paste. Make sure that I expose this collection also in the add beer template. And but here I just want to add all the beers, so not just the one that had a vote. Otherwise, this will never work. And sort them by name. Here, and here you can see all the beers sorted by name here. Just for simplicity, I will also add an empty option that will just say select your beer with an empty value. It will be the first option, and then I need to change my events so that basically it's not about clicking the button anymore, but it's about changing the value of the drop-down. So I need to use the change event, and here I use the same class that I used in the add beer, that is drop-down beer. So in this case, my this is my new reference to the control. Here I want to not to insert a beer because the beer has already been inserted, but I just want to vote for it. So I'm going to update the value that is basically the ID, that is what we have here as a value. And do the same thing we did before. So set vote as the actual vote of the beer plus 1. Now, thing here is we don't actually know what the beer vote is because we don't have the beer here, we just have the ID. So one thing we need to do is get the beer first. And we can say if the beer is found, or we can just check later. We get the beer first, and then we say we increase the vote. And as I said before, the vote may not be set, so we increase the vote for 0 if no vote has been set. The last thing, we cannot reset any text field because we removed the text field, but we can reset drop down to the original value. In this case, if I go back to this and I select in my beer, say in this case, yeah, Bex. The Bex gets new vote and then appears here in the list where I can increase the voting for them. Of course, one thing that happens is that when you do this, it goes for this as well because I change it to an empty string. So basically, I have to say if drop down beer value, sorry, not drop down beer value, that means it's an empty string, for example, just return and don't do anything. Any questions so far?
Yes.
In the server in Meteor.js, in our GitHub version, there is a Meteor function, Meteor calling, called Meteor.startup.
Yeah, very good point. So usually you kind of like want to, when this code, when Meteor goes through this code is the MongoDB is available, so you can actually still already insert and do all these kind of things. But ideally, you would not want to have any code here because you have other logic that needs to maybe initialize your application or create some configuration and act on the configuration and so on. So the best practice for these kind of things is actually to run them when the application has been started. So in this case, you just do Meteor startup. It is kind of like document ready in jQuery on the front end, and you wrap everything around this baby here. So it will look something like that. Does it answer your question?
Yes.
Anything else? Anybody else?
What if I don't like Mongo? Because now there's Mongo in the client and the server in the lib.
Yeah, very good question. So Meteor comes with Mongo as default, and I basically built the whole architecture on top of Mongo, the way the data replicates and is reactive and so on. There are some very nice packages out there that I think are trying to use PostgreSQL as well. Some packages that use, for example, Redis for caching and not exactly just Mongo. But as far as I know, they're not officially supported by Meteor a lot. So you can definitely interface with your any database that you like, and you just have to rewrite a lot of internals and like private function Meteor, the MDG Meteor development group doesn't want to expose to everybody, but only to advanced users. And then you will end up with a non-supported, officially unsupported functionality that may not be the best solution in the long term. I may be wrong, but if I had to choose, if I had a very strong constraint on using like a relational database, I would not be using Meteor. Or what actually you have to do now, we have a like large scale Meteor app, so I have to use Meteor to expose data to a SQL database, so for reporting purposes, but not for like reactive data purposes. So I'm just gonna set up same cron job to actually do to export data. We're kind of like running over time now, so maybe I'll just drive through quickly on the GitHub with a list of the changes and going through the other changes that maybe we will not be able to cover right now, but I can like explain you what I do. So we basically ended up here on the initializing beers list, and the course on GitHub is much more curated. It's a little bit better written, and you can actually see for in the commit history for each commit like what actually has been done and a little bit of a description. As any developer out there, there was a tweet saying any developer having more than 1 or 2 lines of description in any commit is some serious problem. And so I still don't have some serious problem yet, so my commits are very short. But they should be understandable, and if they're not, please get in touch with me and be happy to discuss them. So the thing that I did then after that was basically getting adding an HTTP package. That is, as I added the Bootstrap package, you can add an HTTP package to basically load things from the web, from your server. And what I do with the HTTP package is, let me see exactly, here, should be somewhere here. I am loading for each beer, I'm looping for each beer, and then I'm loading from the Google API the results of images that contain the name of the beer, space, beer. And if there is any result, I take the first image, and I'm going to update the beer that I have that I'm looking through with that image. So this way, whenever the server starts next time, it will update each image with a beer taken from the Google Images API. And that's how you can see here all the beers. But you cannot see it for the ones that you add. But if I were to restart the server now, then the image will appear. The other things that I did here were just adding some nicer UI. So I added Font Awesome, still another package, less to be able to write less CSS with less. And some styling to basically make them look like this. So display them in a list with a voting button that looks more like a nice thumbs up icon. And after this was basically making sure in this implementation I was also using the enter key, capturing the enter key on the keyboard whenever you were typing a beer, also in the text field. So in the one on GitHub you have a drop down where you can select a beer, but you can also type the beer that you want, and you can either press enter or click on the button. This will create a new beer on top of the ones that you already have. And have a default icon if there are no beers available. And the last but not least most important one actually is removing auto-publish. So whenever you use Meteor, Meteor comes with this amazingly dangerous functionality that exposes all your data to everybody. So you create a new collection called user private pics to have like nice things going on in the Snapchat kind of like application. Of course, there are going to be users that are going to misuse that functionality, and people can access all the data from everybody if you implement it in the same way we did tonight. Why? Because in the same way you can add things, you can read things from a client. You can sure filter what you show them, but then everybody can just go on the browser here and write something like beers.find here. Go in the console, use the connection name, so beers.find.fetch. And this will give an array of 200 elements that is all the beers that I have there, even if I don't display them. So say that some of these beers are actually private beers, like this private beer functionality that it sounds very useful. In this case, you don't want to expose them to everybody. So what you do is you remove the auto-publish functionality. That is, Meteor, please stay away from giving the data to everybody. I'm going to handle that because it's not really that difficult. So you remove this package. In the same way you add a package, like the Bootstrap, Font Awesome, you can actually remove one using Meteor, removing the name of the package. So you can see the package is being removed here. And the change is that you don't see anything when you remove the auto-publish package because you don't have any data on the client. All the data is on the server and nothing is sent to the client. So what you have to do in that case, on the server, you have to say, okay, I want to publish this data. And on the client, you have to say, I want to subscribe to this data. So you manually implement the connection between the server publishing and the client subscribing. And you can see that on the GitHub here, where First on the server, we publish data here. So we create this file where we say publish something that we call beers and return a cursor to all the beers. We don't do fetch here because we just publish a pointer to the results. It's kind of like when you go to the grocery store and you point at things and the girl at the checkout just helps you by putting all these things in the bag, and that's kind of like there. You don't have the bag yet, but you have a bag that is there. That's like what you have with find. And when you do fetch, you actually take all the results. So you just publish a cursor here with beers, and on the client I subscribe, because then I say I need these results here, and I subscribe. If you have like an application that deals with sensitive data, here you can check what type of user that is. If it is an admin, you can publish some data, otherwise you can just publish other types of data, and so on.
But is it per collection or can you filter in?
Per collection, yeah. One thing that is going to be very challenging, not impossible, because there are packages on Atmosphere that make it possible, but very challenging, is to publish joins between collections. So say you have a collection of, like for example in Frascati, we have a collection of companies, and then we have like candidates that express preference whether they like a company or not. And in this case, when we return the list of preferences, we need to display company information. So we cannot just return the list of preference because that's nothing, and we have to do a join there. But we have to use a specific package because by default it's very challenging. Especially if you want to make also that data reactive and keep the default behavior of Meteor. And that's it. So, is there any question?
I just looked up Meteor on Wikipedia, and it said it's a rapid prototyping tool. But some of the comments you've made imply it's production ready. What's your opinion on that?
It is production ready, definitely, but and it's also for large scale, and there are some large scale apps out there. I think one of the biggest is Creator, another one is Telescope, but there are some good reproduction apps based on Meteor. And we have a large scale app based on Meteor. For large scale, I mean we just had, well, we had actually a good few thousand users. We have hundreds of templates, and we have been going to production in September. It was a big gamble initially. I have to confess, like I was not as confident as I am today that Meteor would actually be extremely powerful in production as well. But you need to have somebody that is able really to navigate to the nasty parts, to the internals, to the private code base that Meteor doesn't really want to expose. So if you have like a team of JavaScript newbies and you don't have any expert, don't go production on a critical app. Just use it for prototyping. That is easy. You can build a chat in 3 lines. Anybody can get an idea to Meteor very quickly, and that's fantastic for that. But definitely you can go to production if you have some powerful skill in the team as well. And if you do that, you're never going to regret it. Like we can do in 2 developers, we can do things that a team of 10 would take 3 times the time. And it's not because we are exceptional developer or what. It's just that it's easy, it's quick. You just follow the best practice. You don't have technical depth as well because you can do all the testing you want, not many things. So definitely it is, yeah.
Thanks. And then. So it seems to be heavily reliant on WebSockets and publish a PubSub model. Is there anything else like Meteor? What would be the next closest thing?
I don't know anything like Meteor that takes the full kind of thing, the full stacks, and puts it nicely together in a consistent and standardized set of libraries. I don't know anything like that. I know that there are like reactive libraries, a reactive framework. I know that you can use combination of Express.js and all the plus other things. But I don't know yet anything that is also as the kind of support that Meteor gets from the community. And based on JavaScript, is #1 language today as well for like new project coming on GitHub, the number of questions as well, for Stack Overflow. So I don't know anything other like.
Thanks.
Major limitations? Are there any?
Jesus, many. We don't have time to run into one yet. No, so many. It's the biggest one is security. You actually have to know you have to be really, really careful with what you do with Meteor when you publish data. When you publish data, even if you just don't get the limited set of data on the client, the moment you publish it, it's available. But also things like you have to block people from saving things specifically, otherwise anybody can insert, update, delete data from the client. So limitations, I would say just the learning curve is very easy initially, but it's quite limited for like the advanced stuff. They have to really go through some blocks for that. Other limitations. Let me just have a very, very quick look at another presentation about Meteor. I had a list of limitations there, but the fact that they don't come up like here now that quickly means that maybe there are another many. Yeah, well, basically there is a lot of magic in Meteor. So a lot of things you don't see, you don't know what's happening under the hood, that you really have to go in the Meteor code base on GitHub because it's open source, likely, and you have to reverse engineer that to understand actually what's happening. Or we have what we call an poltergeist on one of our servers, like something has a memory leak there, and we try every possible way to investigate and debug what's happening, but we can't. And the reason is there are so many internal things happening in Meteor that sometimes it's difficult to actually understand and debug those things. So you take it as closed box sometimes, and that's a bit of a limitation in the level of debugging you can get there. Besides, you get like this huge app of 300-400 kilobytes that the client has to download initially. Otherwise, they will not even see the loader. And to actually work around that, you do a lot of advanced things. Like you have to hack your way to use like CDN for delivering content. You have to hack your way to make the content synchronous. It's not coming out of the box. But at the same time, it's a very young platform still, so they're catching up to all these things and getting better and better. Anything else?
ECMAScript 2015. ECMAScript 2015.
Yes, supported. As of Meteor 1.2 is officially supported, so if I just start the Meteor app now, I would definitely go with that.
So you can also organize more things in components.
Yeah. Yeah, actually that's very interesting because one of the best things for me about Meteor is that I have my collections and I have my classes started a few months ago, so in CoffeeScript, that are basically defining the behavior on the server, and then I reuse the same classes on the client. So I have a nice object-oriented programming that is isomorphic on those stacks. Yeah, and that's to me is great. I don't have to replicate business logic. That's one of the biggest advantages. Cool. Well, then, thank you very much, and I really hope that you enjoyed this. I would really appreciate any kind of feedback. There is no such thing as honest feedback, and I'm a really resilient person. If you want to give me some harsh feedback to be mean, bring it on. No, please. I would really appreciate any kind of feedback. I would like to have another meetup on January, talking about other things, not myself, as I said, but somebody else. And any feedback is helpful for making this meetup better and better. Thanks.